There's a phone call almost nobody over 40 wants to imagine receiving. It's a Tuesday morning. Your boss asks you into a conference room. There's someone from HR already sitting there. And in the next 15 minutes, the career you've built for 20 or 30 years is over. Not paused, not transitioning. Over. With a severance letter, a cardboard box, and a walk across the parking lot you'll remember in detail for the rest of your life. This happens to somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000 Americans every single year. People in their 50s, sometimes in their early 60s. And the specific financial crisis it creates for middle-class families is the single most destructive financial event most people will ever face. Let me show you the blueprint, because the Americans who survive this moment, and some do remarkably well, are almost always the ones who prepared before it happened. The ones who quietly built resilience during the years when everything seemed fine. And the preparation, once you see it clearly, is simpler than most people would guess. Let me start with the numbers. Because the scale of this risk is so much larger than most Americans realize, and the honest data changes how you'll think about the decade ahead of you. If you're currently 50 years old and you have a corporate or office job, the statistical probability that you will experience an involuntary job loss at least once before you reach full retirement age is somewhere between 40 and 50%. Nearly half. This isn't a rare catastrophe reserved for people in failing industries. It's one of the most common major life events that will happen to middle-aged American professionals in the next 15 years. And here's the part that makes this different from job loss at younger ages. When an American in their 50s gets laid off, the job search process that follows is fundamentally different from the one a 30-year-old goes through. The median time to find a comparable new position is 8 to 12 months. For some, it stretches to 18 months or longer. And the job that eventually gets landed, in a majority of cases, pays meaningfully less than the one that was lost. Research from the Urban Institute, the New School, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics has consistently shown that older workers who experience involuntary job loss see average wage reductions of 20 to 50% in their next position. Some never return to their prior earning level. Let me walk you through what that actually looks like in real life. Imagine a 53-year-old making $130,000 a year. He loses his job in a corporate restructuring. He has 6 months of severance and a small emergency fund. He spends the next 10 months looking for work, burning through savings, stopping his retirement contributions, maybe taking early withdrawals from his 401k to pay the mortgage. When he finally lands a new role, it pays $85,000. He's relieved. He's grateful. But he's also, quietly, a fundamentally different financial person than he was 12 months earlier. The math of what just happened to him is brutal. He lost nearly a year of full income, roughly $130,000. He depleted $30,000 to $60,000 in emergency savings. He stopped contributing to retirement for 10 months and possibly withdrew early, triggering penalties and taxes. And his new salary is $45,000 a year less than his old one. Over the remaining 12 years of his working life, that wage gap alone represents $540,000 in lost income. Not future potential, real dollars, directly removed from his family's lifetime earnings. When you add all of it together, the year without income, the depleted savings, the stopped contributions, the reduced wages, the opportunity cost of lost investment compounding. A single involuntary job loss at 53 typically costs an American middle-class family somewhere between $700,000 and $1.2 million over their remaining working life and retirement. One job loss, one bad Tuesday morning meeting, a seven-figure financial event. This is where most people get it wrong. They assume job loss is a temporary setback you recover from. For a 29-year-old, it often is. For a 53-year-old, it usually isn't. The recovery is partial and the financial dent is permanent. The difference isn't about effort or resilience. It's about structural reality. Older workers face age discrimination even when it's illegal. Their skills may be perceived as outdated. Their salary expectations, based on decades of advancement, often exceed what new employers will pay for their role level, and the industries that are growing may not be the ones they built their careers in. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because the financial advice industry systematically understates this risk. Most retirement calculators assume continuous employment from your current age until 65 or 67, with steady salary growth the entire way. That assumption is simply wrong for a significant percentage of Americans over 50. When the calculator says you'll be fine by 67, it's assuming a career trajectory that statistical reality doesn't actually support for roughly half the people using it. You don't need more money, you need a better plan, and the plan has to include, seriously, the assumption that a major career disruption may happen between now and your planned retirement. Not as a worst-case scenario you refuse to think about, but as a realistic possibility you actively prepare for. Because the Americans who survive job loss in their 50s with their retirement intact are almost always the ones who treated the possibility as real, years before it happened, and built specific preparation into their financial and professional lives accordingly. But before we get into what that preparation actually looks like, you need to understand why this risk is growing, not shrinking, over the next 2 decades, and why the old assumptions about working until 67 are becoming increasingly unreliable for ordinary middle-class careers. Let me explain why this risk is actually growing. Because the dynamics of the American job market have shifted in ways that make 50-plus employment significantly more precarious than it was even 15 or 20 years ago. The first shift is in corporate loyalty. There was a time within the memory of many people watching this video when a long-tenured employee in their 50s was considered an asset. 30 years of institutional knowledge, relationships with clients, deep understanding of company processes. Companies valued that continuity and protected their senior staff during downturns. That era is largely over. In most modern corporate environments, a 55-year-old employee is, from the company's perspective, one of the most expensive seats in the building. Their salary is high, accumulated from decades of raises. Their benefits cost more because health insurance premiums rise with age. Their retirement contributions are larger. And in many companies, when budgets are tightened, the explicit or implicit calculation becomes, how many younger, cheaper employees could we hire for the cost of this one senior person? This isn't cruelty. It's the logical outcome of a corporate culture that prioritizes quarterly earnings over long-term institutional knowledge. But the consequence, for you as a middle-aged professional, is that your accumulated experience, the thing that once protected your job, may now be actively working against it in the cost calculation of your employer. The second shift is technology. Many roles that felt permanent a decade ago are being transformed or eliminated by automation, artificial intelligence, and digitization. Not just factory work, white-collar roles, middle management, administrative positions, certain kinds of analysis, legal research, financial modeling, customer service, writing tasks. The specific roles at risk shift every few years, but the pattern is consistent. Jobs that required 20 years of experience to perform excellently are increasingly being done at acceptable quality levels by software plus less experienced humans. This doesn't mean middle-aged professionals are being wholesale replaced, but it does mean that specific skill sets, the ones that took you 20 years to build, may become less valuable over a shorter period than you'd expected. And when a skill becomes less valuable, the market price for that skill drops, which affects both your ability to hold your current job and your ability to find a comparable new one if you lose it. The third shift is in industry stability itself. Even 15 years ago, Americans could reasonably assume that an established industry would continue to exist in recognizable form across their working lives. That assumption is now much weaker. Entire business models can collapse in 5 or 7 years. Companies that dominated their industries for decades disappear. Sectors that were central to the economy shrink dramatically. For a 45-year-old with 20 years of working life ahead, the industry you're currently in may not exist in its current form when you retire. This is not hyperbole. It's the observable pattern of the last 2 decades accelerating. The fourth shift is age bias in hiring, which has not gone away despite being illegal. Research has repeatedly demonstrated that identical resumes with older birth dates receive significantly fewer callbacks than those with younger birth dates. Hiring managers often have unconscious assumptions about adaptability, technology fluency, cultural fit, and willingness to report to younger managers. These biases persist, documented in study after study. And they mean that for a 55-year-old who loses a job, the job search is measurably harder than it would be for the same person at 35 with comparable credentials. This is where most people get it wrong. They assume their personal experience, their strong performance, their loyalty to their employer, their specialized skills. They assume these things will protect them, and sometimes they do. But they also consistently don't protect roughly 40% of American professionals over 50 from at least one significant involuntary employment disruption before retirement. I want to be honest about something. The combination of these 4 shifts, reduced corporate loyalty, technological disruption, industry instability, and persistent age bias, has created a reality where working continuously at a professional job from age 50 to 67 is no longer a safe assumption for most middle-class Americans. It's a hope. It might happen. But planning your financial life as if it's guaranteed is increasingly a form of optimism bias, not realistic planning. The American professionals who are financially resilient at 65 are not the ones who got lucky and kept their jobs the whole time. Some did, many didn't. The resilient ones are the ones who built their financial and professional lives assuming disruption was possible, and positioned themselves so that when it came, if it came, the damage was manageable rather than catastrophic. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And the plan has to accept this new reality as the baseline assumption, not as the pessimistic edge case. Which means the preparation we're going to talk about next isn't paranoia. It's appropriate realism, applied to a stage of life where the stakes of being wrong are enormous. Now let me give you the preparation framework, because this is where most of the value of this conversation actually lives. Not in understanding the risk, but in knowing what to do about it in the years before the risk materializes. I'm going to walk you through 6 specific pillars of preparation. Think of them as a structural defense system. Not all 6 are equally urgent for every situation, but together they form the complete picture of what genuine readiness looks like for an American professional in their 40s or 50s. Pillar 1 is the Extended Emergency Fund. The standard financial advice is to keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund. For a 30-year-old, that's probably appropriate. For a 52-year-old at risk of extended job search, it's dramatically insufficient. The honest target for an American in their 50s is 12 to 18 months of living expenses, held in safe, liquid, immediately accessible accounts, not retirement accounts, not investment accounts, savings accounts, money market funds, short-term CDs. This feels excessive to most people. 12 months of expenses for a middle-class family can be $60,000 to $90,000 of cash, sitting in boring accounts earning minimal returns. Emotionally, it feels like money being wasted. Strategically, it's the single most important financial buffer you can build in your 50s. Because if you're laid off at 53 and your job search takes 10 months, the difference between having this fund and not having it is the difference between a stressful but survivable period and a financial catastrophe that permanently damages your retirement. The goal is not to earn returns on this money. The goal is to have the money accessible when you need it most. Treat it as insurance, not investment. Pillar 2 is continuous skill development. The skills that keep you employable at 58 are not, in most cases, the same skills that made you successful at 43. Technology changes, industry practices evolve. Tools that were cutting edge 10 years ago are outdated now, and the professionals who remain employable through their 50s are almost always the ones who have actively maintained their skills throughout, not let them atrophy. This doesn't mean learning every new technology that emerges. It means, specifically, staying current in the 2 or 3 capabilities most central to your professional identity and being willing to add 1 or 2 genuinely new skills per decade. A mid-career financial analyst who can use modern analytics tools, works comfortably with AI-assisted research, and understands current regulatory frameworks is dramatically more employable than one whose skill set froze in place 15 years ago. The investment required is real, maybe 50 to 100 hours per year of deliberate skill development. Online courses, industry certifications, professional workshops. For most middle-class professionals, this is an afternoon every 2 weeks. Not heroic, just consistent. And over a decade, this consistency is what separates professionals who remain in demand from those who gradually become obsolete. Pillar 3 is professional network maintenance. The single strongest predictor of how quickly a laid-off professional finds new work is the strength of their professional network, not their resume, not their credentials, their network. People who will take their call, make an introduction, mention their name in a meeting, forward their resume to a decision maker. The challenge is that professional networks atrophy silently when you're comfortably employed. You stop attending industry events. You stop having coffee with former colleagues. You stop engaging on professional platforms. And by the time you need the network, you realize it's been 10 years since you had meaningful contact with most of the people in it. The preparation is to treat network maintenance as a standing investment, like retirement contributions. A specific recurring commitment. Maybe one professional conversation per month with someone outside your immediate work context. Maybe one industry event per quarter. Maybe keeping a running list of professionals you want to stay in meaningful contact with and deliberately reaching out to them on a rotating schedule, not networking in the transactional sense, relationship maintenance. Because when you need the network, you don't have time to build it. It has to already be there. Pillar 4 is the side income stream we covered extensively in the previous video. An income-generating asset built alongside your primary career is one of the most powerful forms of insurance against job loss in your 50s. Even a modest side income, $15,000 or $20,000 a year, fundamentally changes the urgency of the job search when the primary income disappears. It means you're not starting from zero. It means you can be patient. It means you can decline the wrong job offers instead of accepting whatever comes first. If you've already started building this asset, protect it. If you haven't started, this is another urgent reason to begin. Pillar 5 is early financial independence positioning. I'll explain what I mean. If you're in your 40s or early 50s, aggressively accelerating your savings rate and building wealth faster than the standard timeline means that by 55 or 57, you may be close enough to financial independence that a job loss becomes an inconvenience rather than a crisis. Not because you plan to retire early, but because the option to walk away gives you negotiating power and emotional stability during the working years. Pillar 6 is the mental and emotional preparation itself, which we're going to address directly in the next block. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money, you need a better plan. And the plan for job loss risk specifically has to be built during the stable years. During the years when your job feels secure and the possibility of disruption feels distant, because that's the only window during which you can prepare. By the time the disruption arrives, the preparation window has already closed. Let me address something that almost no financial content talks about directly, because it turns out to be one of the most important factors in whether an older American recovers well from job loss or doesn't. The emotional and psychological preparation matters as much as the financial preparation. I want to be honest about what happens emotionally when a 53-year-old is told on a Tuesday morning that their job is ending. It's not just a financial event, it's an identity event. For most American professionals, particularly men, but also many women, their job is deeply intertwined with their sense of who they are. Their work is what they do, how they introduce themselves, how they contribute to the world, how they measure their adult significance. When that job ends involuntarily, something happens in the mind that is more than just practical concern about finances. There's a sense of failure, even when the layoff had nothing to do with performance. There's shame, even when the person knows intellectually they did nothing wrong. There's grief for a career chapter that closed without warning. There's often a quiet fear that they've peaked, that what comes next will be a slow decline. that they've already done the best work they'll ever do. All of this is happening simultaneously with the practical demands of a job search, which is the worst possible time to be emotionally compromised. The person needs to network, to interview, to project confidence, to negotiate from strength, to make good decisions under pressure. Instead, they're often quietly struggling with something closer to depression than to strategic thinking. And the job search, which was already going to be long, becomes even longer because the person searching isn't bringing their best self to the process. This is where preparation matters, because emotional resilience, like financial resilience, is something you can actively build before you need it. Let me walk you through the specific mental preparations that make a real difference. First, make peace with the possibility now. Sit with it. Imagine, with some honesty, what it would feel like to lose your current job. Not as a worst-case fantasy, but as a realistic thought experiment. Who would you tell first? What would you actually do the next morning? What did you miss most? What would surprise you about how you handled it? Doing this mental work now, while it's hypothetical, dramatically reduces the psychological shock if it ever becomes real. People who have thought ahead about how they would respond to a layoff handle the actual event with much more composure than those who never let themselves consider the possibility. Second, separate your identity from your job. This sounds abstract, but it's practical. If your entire sense of who you are is bound up in being the vice president of operations at a specific company, losing that role feels like losing yourself. If your identity includes many layers, spouse, parent, friend, neighbor, musician, woodworker, volunteer, whatever matters to you outside work, the loss of one layer still leaves the others intact. The healthiest older professionals I've encountered invest consistently in non-work identities throughout their careers, not as a hedge against layoffs, as a fuller life. But when a career disruption comes, that fuller life is what holds them up. Third, normalize career transitions in your thinking. In American professional culture, we often treat a single continuous career as the norm and any interruption as a failure. That framing is not just outdated, it's actively harmful. A 53-year-old who accepts that transitions are a normal part of modern working life can respond to a layoff as a chapter change rather than a catastrophic ending. The difference in how they approach the next 6 months is enormous. Fourth, develop relationships with professionals who have navigated layoffs successfully. Know people who've been through it and rebuilt. Not as a morbid preparation, but as a source of honest guidance and perspective. When you need to understand what a severance negotiation looks like, or how to handle the strange logistical realities of being between roles, or how to manage a spouse's anxiety, you want to know people who've lived through it. They exist in abundance. You just have to notice them before you need them. Fifth, build a specific financial decision framework for a job loss scenario. Not in detail, but in principle. What would you cut first? What would you protect? How long could you realistically go on the emergency fund alone? What retirement account withdrawals would be acceptable? What wouldn't? Having thought through these questions in advance means that if the event comes, you're executing decisions rather than making them under emotional pressure. This is similar to the pre-committed strategy we discussed in the market crash video. The decision made in calm has vastly better quality than the decision made in crisis. Sixth, and perhaps most importantly, understand that recovery is possible. The Americans who navigate late career job loss best are consistently the ones who refuse to see it as the end of their working life. They treat it as a transition. They stay active. They keep engaging professionally. They try things. They don't retreat into shame or paralysis. And a significant percentage of them, 18 to 30 months after the initial loss, have built something new that works for them. Sometimes it's a new full-time job. Sometimes it's consulting. Sometimes it's a business. Sometimes it's an earlier than planned but genuinely comfortable retirement. The common thread is that they didn't let the initial shock define the trajectory of what came next. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And the plan for the emotional dimension of this risk has to include the understanding that your financial preparation is only half of what matters. The other half is who you become in advance for the person you'll need to be if and when the moment arrives. Let me speak directly to a specific group of people watching this video, because you deserve to be addressed honestly, not indirectly. If you're watching this video right now and you've already lost your job, if this isn't preparation for a hypothetical future, but a description of something that already happened to you, I want you to hear the next few minutes carefully. The fact that you're here, watching a 60-minute video about financial planning, tells me something important about you. You haven't given up. You're still looking for the next right move. You're still engaged with the question of how to rebuild. That is not a small thing. Most people, after a traumatic job loss in their 50s, retreat for months before they start to rebuild. You're already doing the work. Recognize that. Now let me tell you some things that Americans in your situation usually don't hear clearly. First, the job you lost is not coming back in the form you remember it. This is painful to accept, but it's also freeing once you do. You can stop trying to recreate what you had. You can start asking what comes next. The grief for the old career is real and valid and deserves space. But grief is not a plan. At some point, you have to let the old thing go so your hands are free to hold the new thing. Second, your next role almost certainly pays less than your last one. Not because you're worth less, because the market for 50-plus professionals is structurally tighter than the market you were in last time you looked for work. This is not about you. It's about the economics of the environment you're now navigating. Accepting this early, rather than spending 18 months searching for a role that matches your old salary, saves you an enormous amount of time and emotional energy. The sooner you recalibrate what a good next step looks like, the sooner you stop burning through savings and start rebuilding. Third, the job search you're doing is probably not optimized for your situation. Most American professionals over 50 approach their job search the way a 35-year-old would. Resume online, apply to listings, wait for callbacks. This approach at your stage has a very low success rate. The jobs you can actually get are almost entirely going to come through your network, not through application portals. Spending 10 hours a week networking and 2 hours a week on applications will produce dramatically better results than the reverse. Most older job seekers do it backwards. Fourth, you have options beyond the conventional corporate path that you might not have considered seriously. Consulting in your field, fractional executive roles, part-time work combined with the project business, teaching or training at the college or professional education level. joining an advisory board, acquiring a small existing business, buying a franchise, building what we discussed in the previous video, an income-generating asset. Some of these paths pay as much as or more than your former role, with better quality of life. Some pay less in cash but come with benefits that matter. The point is that corporate employment is one path, not the only path. And for many professionals in their 50s, it's no longer the best path. Fifth, your timeline may need to extend. The idea that you'll work until 65 and retire with full benefits assumed continuous employment. That assumption may no longer apply to you, which means your retirement may come later than planned, or it may come in stages, or it may come with a different lifestyle than you'd imagined. This is not failure. This is adaptation. Millions of Americans are quietly restructuring their retirement plans in real time because a straight-line path didn't materialize. You're not alone. You're joining a large and growing category of people reinventing what late career looks like. Now let me speak to something harder. If the job loss has affected your marriage, your health, your mental state, please get help, not abstractly, specifically. A therapist who specializes in career transitions. A marriage counselor if it's affecting your relationship. A doctor if your physical or mental health is suffering. The financial recovery cannot happen in a parallel track to personal collapse. The person has to be intact for the finances to recover. Put the person back together first, or at least alongside. And finally, if you're watching this and the job loss has already cost you more than you can easily recover, if your retirement savings are significantly depleted, if you're in your late 50s or early 60s, if the math genuinely doesn't add up to a comfortable traditional retirement, please hear this. Adjusted retirement is still retirement. A modest life in a lower-cost area with Social Security, some savings, and perhaps part-time income can still be a good life. Not the life you imagined, but a life with real value, real peace, real meaning. The American cultural story about retirement, the big house, the travel, the grandchildren's college funds, that story is one version. There are many others. And some of those other versions are, honestly, better than the version that the financial planning industry tries to sell. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money, you need a better plan. And the plan, if you're already in the middle of this, is to keep moving. To not freeze. To rebuild from exactly where you are, not from where you wish you were. Every single American who has rebuilt after 50-plus job loss started from where they were. You can too. Before I close this out with the final piece, I want to pause for a moment. If you've made it this far into the video with me, if you've sat through some of the hardest realities of middle-aged American working life without clicking away, if you're still here and still willing to think clearly about a risk most people refuse to look at directly, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and walk with us every single day. This is the kind of conversation we have here, not the sanitized version, not the reassuring version, the honest version, grounded in what actually happens to American professionals over 50. And what can actually be done about it. And I want to say something directly. The silence around this topic in mainstream financial content is not accidental. It's uncomfortable to name. It threatens the tidy retirement calculators. It unsettles the assumption that if you just follow the rules, everything works out. It doesn't sell well on cheerful morning shows. So most financial content, most retirement planning software, most advisor conversations quietly ignore the 40% probability that your working life will be disrupted by involuntary job loss before you retire. But ignoring the risk does not make the risk smaller. It just makes you less prepared when it arrives. And you are adults. You deserve to be spoken to like adults, which means being told clearly that this is a real risk and that preparation is both possible and essential. Now let me give you the final piece. The piece that pulls everything together. If you take nothing else from this video, take this one principle. Build your life so that a job loss is an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. Let me unpack that, because it's simple to state and enormous in its implications. Right now, for most middle-class Americans in their 40s and 50s, losing their primary job would be a catastrophe, not just an emergency, a genuine, life-altering catastrophe that affects their mortgage, their children's college plans, their retirement timeline, their health insurance, and their mental health, all simultaneously. The reason it would be catastrophic is structural. The entire financial life has been built on the assumption of continuous primary employment. Remove that assumption, and the structure collapses. The alternative is to build a life that does not depend entirely on one income source. A life with real savings reserves. A life with a secondary income stream. A life with maintained skills and active networks. A life with flexibility about where you live and how you spend. A life where losing one piece doesn't collapse the whole thing. In that life, a job loss is still a real event. It's still stressful. It still requires adjustments. But it's not a catastrophe. It's a difficult season that you navigate with your resources intact and your options available. Moving from the first kind of life to the second kind of life is what this entire video has been about. The emergency fund, the side income, the skills, the network, the emotional preparation, the financial discipline. These aren't separate recommendations. They're the interlocking components of a single strategy. A strategy that turns a potential catastrophe into a manageable transition. And here's the beautiful part. Building this kind of resilient life doesn't just protect you from job loss. It makes your entire life better, even if the job loss never comes. The savings give you peace of mind. The secondary income creates options. The skills keep you engaged. The network enriches your professional life. The emotional work deepens your relationships. This preparation is not a sacrifice you make against a disaster that may not happen. It's a genuinely better way to live, which happens to also be what saves you if disaster does arrive. This is the strategic framing I want you to carry with you. You're not preparing for the worst. You're building the best version of a middle-aged life, which happens to be robust against the realistic risks of middle-aged life. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And the plan for this specific risk has to be built during the stable years, while you're still employed, while the emergency hasn't happened, while you have the income and the time and the emotional reserves to build the structure that would protect you if needed. Most people won't do this work. They'll hope for the best. They'll assume their job is safe. They'll trust the optimistic retirement calculator. And for roughly 60% of them, it'll work out fine. They'll retire from their jobs on schedule and everything will be okay. But for the 40% who experience involuntary job loss, The lack of preparation will turn a difficult season into a defining financial crisis. And the difference between those two outcomes will not have been about effort or character or intelligence. It will have been about whether they built the preparation during the years they still could. You're one of the people who's listening. You've chosen to look at this clearly. You have time, you have options. You have the capacity to build what needs to be built. The only question remaining is whether you start this month or continue postponing until the choice is no longer yours. There's a scene I want you to carry with you after this video ends. Imagine a Tuesday morning, 5 or 7 years from now. You've just had the call you never wanted to receive. The walk across the parking lot with the cardboard box. The drive home in the middle of a weekday when the world looks strange and still. You pull into your driveway. You sit in the car for a few minutes before going inside. And here's where the story splits into two versions. In the first version, you walk into the house and your spouse meets you in the kitchen. You tell them what happened. There's a long, quiet moment. And then, almost before the emotional weight has fully landed, something practical happens. You both know there's money. 12 months of expenses sitting in a savings account built patiently over the last several years. You both know you have a small side business that generates $1,000 or $2,000 a month. You both know that your professional network is current, that your skills are sharp, that you've thought about this scenario before. You cry. You're shaken. But within an hour, you've already started thinking about the first phone calls you'll make tomorrow. The job loss is real, but it's not a catastrophe. It's a season. You know you'll get through it because you've built a life that can absorb this particular impact. In the second version, the same walk, the same drive, the same kitchen. But the conversation that follows is different. There's no emergency fund worth mentioning, no side income. Your network has atrophied. Your skills haven't been updated in years. You have a mortgage, and the fear of losing it is immediate. You have children in college. You have aging parents. And the math, when you start to do it that night at the kitchen table, doesn't work. You're going to have to make brutal decisions. Fast, under enormous emotional pressure, and the choices you make in the next 6 months are going to shape the next 20 years of your financial life. Not because you failed, because you didn't prepare. Both of these scenes are possible. Both are happening right now in American homes across the country. And the difference between them is almost never about income levels or intelligence or work ethic or luck. It's about whether the people in those scenes spent their 40s and 50s building the preparation that would let them handle a disruption without collapsing under it. I want to say something directly about what this preparation actually is. At its deepest level, the practical steps we've covered in this video, the emergency fund, the skills, the network, the side income, the emotional work, all of them are important. But underneath them is something simpler. The preparation is, fundamentally, a decision you make about what kind of life you want to build during your healthy working years. A life organized around the assumption that nothing disruptive will happen. Or a life organized around the assumption that something disruptive might happen, and therefore structured to be robust against it. The first kind of life is easier. It requires less savings, less effort, less uncomfortable thinking. It lets you spend more, consume more, live more expansively in the moment. It's the life most middle-class Americans default into because nobody ever explicitly asks them to choose. The second kind of life is harder. It requires you to save when it feels unnecessary, to build when you could be resting, to maintain skills when your current job doesn't require them, to have uncomfortable conversations with yourself about possibilities you'd rather not think about. It's not fun. It's not celebrated. Nobody throws you a party for your 12-month emergency fund. But the second kind of life is also the one that holds together when the hard moments come. And for roughly 40% of you watching this video, a hard moment will come sometime between now and your planned retirement. You can't know in advance which 40%. You can only decide today whether to build the life that would handle it or the life that wouldn't. Now, before you go, let me ask you for 3 things. First, if anything in this video hit you tonight, subscribe to this channel. Walk with us. The next video in this series is going to be about something American retirees rarely discuss honestly: the specific psychological adjustments required to actually enjoy retirement once you finally get there, and why so many people who spent decades preparing for retirement find themselves unexpectedly miserable in it. You don't want to miss that one. Second, share this video with 5 people, 5 friends, 5 co-workers, 5 family members. People in their 40s and 50s who haven't thought seriously about this risk. You might be the reason years from now that one of them opens a kitchen conversation with the spouse and finds that the math, painfully but genuinely, holds together. And third, leave me a comment. An honest one. Tell me whether you're currently employed and still have time to prepare, or whether you're already living through the story I described in this video. Tell me what you need most right now. Tell me what you want me to dig into next. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people counting on you. And remember, a career is a season, not a guarantee. Build the life that stays intact when the season changes. Because the season will change, for some of us sooner than others. And the people who built beforehand are the only ones who get to keep choosing what comes next.